Bring on the Sabbath, a production of the Church of God International. Broadcast live from Tyler, Texas.
With Wes White, Nancy White, and Jeff Reed. Join us tonight as we continue our exciting Bible study of the book of Genesis. We welcome your comments and your questions in our chat room, on Facebook, YouTube, or via email. Now, your host, Wes White.
Good evening and welcome to our 20th program of Bring on the Sabbath. Hi to Jeff and Nancy who are in the studio. I am in a really good mood tonight. I cleaned house today, so it'll be nice for the Sabbath. I got to take a nap, so I'll be all wide-eyed and bushy-tailed for the show tonight. Our Botts family, we just had pizza for supper. Of course, they brought their own pizza. They brought green olives instead of jalapenos. Okay. And we want to welcome a new addition to the staff, a young lady named Bailey. So welcome aboard, Bailey. And
welcome, Bailey.
We got a lot of stuff for you tonight. Nancy's going to do the Alpha and Omega current events.
Wait, was that me? I'm
No.
kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay. Nancy's going to do the Alpha and Omega current events about would Jesus were a Rolex. Can you believe that? We're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about Britain's exit from the European Union. We've had a lot of discussion on that subject at the CGI webpage today. We're going to talk about the Pope's comments about divorce and remarriage. And we're going to continue our study on the book of Genesis. How in the world are we going to get all this stuff in?
We never do.
Okay, we never do. All right.
All right. So, hey, Wes, you don't ever comment on current affairs on the show anymore. How come?
No, I don't. Because it's so nasty out there with people being hateful in politics. And we like to keep it happy here at the show. I keep up with the news, but I sure don't want to be talking about all the bad stuff that's out there on this show.
All right. Well, come on. Give us a comment tonight.
You really want to comment
Yeah,
tonight?
sure.
All right, here's a comment. I read this week that 25% of the American public is, at this point, undecided on the presidential election.
25%?
25%. Wow.
That's a huge number.
That's a big number. And that's how bad it is these days. And here's what that 25% number means. 25% of the American voters don't know whether they want to move to Canada or Mexico after the November election.
All right. Seriously,
No,
Wes.
no. Before you get into your thing, Nancy, I just got to read a few paragraphs. It's a little addition to the script. Nobody knows that I brought this with tonight. A few paragraphs. This is from the Dallas Morning News. I was reading it during the my lunch today, and it's so recent that I didn't get a chance to cut it and paste it into the script. So I'm throwing this curve at Nancy and Jeff. They don't know this is coming.
Oh, wow.
Front page of the Dallas Morning News this morning. It says, poll, fear and loathing rise between the parties. And here's what it says. I'm just going to read a little bit of it. It says nearly half the Republicans regard Democrats as immoral, lazy, and dishonest, more so than other Americans. And 7 out of 10 Democrats view Republicans as being closed-minded. And altogether, about half of the respondents of this new poll, it was put out by the Pew Research Group, it says that they are angry and afraid of the other side. Now, this is significant because the poll points out it hasn't always been this way in American politics. It says, this is not politics as usual. It says, although partisans have long harbored some dislike of the opposition, voters' views of the other party are now so negative, more so than at any other time in over a quarter of a century, according to Pew. In both parties, about 4 in 10 say they view the other side's positions as so misguided that they threaten the nation's well-being.
Wow.
And let's see, let me read 2 more paragraphs here and we'll move on. It says, among Democrats who voted for Bernie Sanders in the primaries, for example, more than 2/3 of them said the Republican Party makes them afraid. And nearly 6 out of 10 says the GOP makes them angry. And finally, it says about half the Republicans, regardless of whether they supported Trump as the nominee or somebody else, they are, quote unquote, afraid of the Democrats. Now,
A fear.
a fear.
So everybody's afraid of each other.
Everybody's afraid of each other. Now, all of this fear, and this is a really important point that I want to stress here, all of this fear and anger that we're seeing out there is not accidental. It is not happenstance. It is happening for a reason. It is happening because the politicians and the media are manipulating us. And I'm not into conspiracy theories. If you watch this show, you know I am not into the Bilderbergers and the Jewish bankers and the Jesuits. I'm not into that stuff. But these people are manipulating us. I've said this time and time again, and some of you are getting tired of me repeating myself. I'm going to make these 3 points. Number one, the political TV shows and radio shows are trying to stir you up. And this is from both sides, the left and the right. When they get you all fired up about politics, it increases their ratings. Because this stuff makes you want to go back and watch more. It's like one of those sick reality TV shows. It's addicting. Point number two, the political action committees want to stir you up. Now, I've never given a dime to any PAC, and yet my phone constantly rings with some recording from a PAC asking me for money, and they say, you've got to give us money because it's so bad. If you don't send it, this guy on the other side is going to do this. So the PACs have become very powerful in this country because they are able to stir people up and get money. That's number two. Number three, the politicians want to stir you up because they want your vote. Again, all of these people out there have an agenda, and guess what? It works. This Dallas Morning News article is representative of the fact that it works. These people are constantly succeeding in stirring people up, and not in a good way. And the sad part is that so many in the church are falling for this deception. And these are the people who have the Holy Spirit. And I thought the Holy Spirit's supposed to be guiding us into doing wise things. As Christians, we have to recognize that there is no love in these messages. There's no love there. Listen to these messages. There's no love. And what's the one guiding principle in our Christian walk? Jesus said it on the night that he was betrayed. He said, people will know that you're mine if you have love for one another. Mm-hmm. And too many Christians are forsaking the requirement that we love. Instead, they've embraced the fear-mongering of the politicians and the media and the PACs. Too many Christians get all immersed in this fear and loathing. They're preaching gloom and doom instead of the gospel of Jesus and his coming kingdom to this earth. And that's our job, to preach the gospel of the kingdom. Okay, Nancy.
All right, Wes. I feel like I don't have to say seriously. That was pretty serious.
That's pretty serious.
But there are a couple of serious, important news items that I want to talk about. By a vote of 52% to 48%, pretty close, the people of the UK have decided to leave the European Union, the so-called Brexit. Prime Minister David Cameron has resigned, and today global markets have been suffering because of that.
Yeah, the stock market was down. The Dow Jones was down like 500 points.
The pound is down.
The pound is down.
The markets are down. People are afraid because they don't know what the future is.
Yeah.
And so when people can't see, they don't know what the future holds from a big major thing like this, you have the markets will have fear and they will go down.
It's the uncertainty that's killing the market.
Yes.
Now, most of you know that Bots, Bring on the Sabbath, it's not a show where we get hung up on predictive prophecy. Prophecy is important. 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy. And we're not trying to repeat the mistake of the past where so many people predicted dates and then they ended up making the church look stupid. We don't want to do that by commenting on things like the Brexit in an improper way.
Right.
We stick to the facts. We stay away from the predictions and the prophecies. Now, my first personal observation, and it's worth everything you're paying for. What are you paying for this?
We'll pay.
You're paying zero. Not paying
If he's getting paid, I want to get paid.
I did have a check written out. I guess
No, checks for Bailey.
For Bailey. Okay, all right.
All right. This observation is worth everything that you're paying for.
Yeah.
My observation is that this Brexit is a blow to those who say that a one world government is imminent. I mean, I've been hearing this ever since since I learned to read. Sure. Oh, there's this one world government. Because now there's talk of Scotland breaking away from the UK.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Spain and France are talking about leaving the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the Eastern European countries are threatening to leave. People in Europe are angry at globalization in the same way that Trump and Sanders supporters in the U.S. are angry at globalization. Now, if Scotland were to leave the UK would no longer be the United Kingdom. It would, at that point, be just England, because there's no two kingdoms united. Some of the talking heads on the TV shows are saying that this may inspire Quebec to secede from Canada. And they tried that a couple times in my lifetime. They voted it down twice, so it's hard to
There's
tell.
been some people in Texas who've been talking about it. Texit.
There you
Because
go.
there's some people who
That's
want
right.
Texas independence. They've been wanting it for a couple hundred years or whatever.
Exactly. This may cause the Texas secessionist movement to rear its ugly head, and it was really popular. I think like 10 years ago, I was over at people's house and they're talking, and they were in a church. They're saying, "Oh yeah, we're Texas secessionists," but that seems to have died out.
Yeah.
My point is that the trend at this point in time doesn't seem to be a movement toward a one world government. We seem to be moving in the opposite direction, more into nationalism than globalism. But again, with all this stuff, we just don't know. We can only look at what we see as a trend.
Well, from what I heard, I guess the people who actually voted, that most of the young people who between 18 and 24, they actually voted to stay within. So there's a younger demographic who wants to be part of the EU.
Right.
And it was the older people, mostly older, over 60,
Yeah.
and mostly predominantly white English, the traditional
Brits.
English Brits,
Yeah.
Brit population turned out in record numbers because they've been. It was kind of a reaction to a lot of the immigration issues that they see that's affecting their country.
Yeah.
Because I guess what the European Union is basically, it's kind of a weird kind of how it is. It's not necessarily a state, but it has a lot of the trappings of a state. Where I think the European Union has borders that, as far as if you have a visa in the European Union, you can travel from like any country. You can go over the borders or whatever. If you're part of the union, you're allowed to travel in these countries. I think they have national the parliament, where I think each of the member states they elect members to the parliament. And they have and then I think each of the countries, I think there's 28 countries. Each one of them has one executive, like an executive branch, where they put one person to that committee and stuff like that. So it has hit many of the trappings of a state. I think they have their own flag.
Yeah.
They have their own national anthem. Did you know they had their own national anthem?
European Union, I did.
It's Ode to Joy, Beethoven's Ode to Joy. So I thought that was interesting. That's their national anthem. So they have these trappings of a state, but then they have basically 28 independent governments that are sovereign, because they all keep their sovereignty, but they're working together. And so this right here causes a lot of problems. I think the people in Britain didn't like the fact that where somebody like Germany could let in immigrants and give them visas, and now they're coming to England. So a lot of that problems of them leading towards that globalization, but never has it been like a union like we imagine, like in prophecies, so to speak.
Not even close.
No.
Another thing that I read about today was on Facebook. I saw someone posted, good for you, Britain, and now if the U.S. could just get out of the United Nations.
Yeah.
Which is an entirely different animal than what the EU was.
Well, the United Nations has even less power than the EU has.
Sure.
EU basically has some powers, but again, they still have their sovereignty.
Yeah.
The United Nations basically, we can veto anything we want as far as that. So there's very, very little power in the United Nations.
All right, let's bring it a little closer to home regarding the Church of God movement.
Yes.
It's interesting that the Church of God movement, going back to the 50s and 60s, has always predicted that Britain would ultimately leave the EU, and that leaving would cause the European beast to attack and defeat Britain and to take them into slavery. I mean, this has been part of our theology for a long time. Again, we on Bots, we're not saying we know this is going to happen in the final days before Jesus returns, and we don't even know for sure that we are in the final days before Jesus returns.
What we have taught, to let people know who don't know exactly what we taught, and part of our doctrines now, is we taught that America and the United States are modern day Israel.
America and Britain.
I mean, American Britain. American United States, forget Britain. American and Britain are what Ephraim and Manasseh tribes from modern Israel, and there's other modern Israel states. And so for the European Union to be, and again, we're looking at the prophecies in Daniel, I think chapter 2 and maybe 7, where there's and the image talks about all different kingdoms. And I was looking at this today because I was interested to see what people were saying, and everybody pretty much agrees what those kingdoms were, from Babylon down to Rome. And you have that, if y'all remember or know the image in Daniel where it has the 2 legs of iron, and everybody agrees that's Rome. But what people disagree on is what the feet of the iron mixed with clay are. And again, we've taught that this is probably from our traditional prophecy standpoint going to be a resurrection of the Roman Empire in Europe is going to come together
with 10 nations,
with 10
one
nations.
representing each toe.
Yeah, and it's going to be like under a strong ruler and stuff like
Right.
that. And what we have right now is nothing like
No, it's not.
what we said.
Nancy, do you have any comments before we move on to the next topic?
No, but shall we say shout outs to the people who are online?
No, not time for shout outs yet. Let's
Okay. No comments.
All right, go on to your next thing then, Nancy.
All right.
In other news?
Okay, in other news, the Pope stated that most marriages that take place within the Catholic Church are invalid because the parties too often don't understand the biblical commitment.
He said most marriages in the church.
She's getting
Okay,
that.
okay. Wait, what?
He said most marriages in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
Don't understand what biblical commitment really is. So
Uh-huh.
when going into it, they don't understand. Of course, he walked it back a little bit and changed the wording to many marriages.
Okay, good.
Instead,
Yeah.
because even he couldn't keep up with the divorce
All right.
papers after that.
Yeah, now this is a fascinating comment by the Pope because everyone has been wondering how he was going to handle the very difficult problem of divorce and remarriage in the Catholic Church. Because the Catholic Church's stance on DNR has been very, very workable for hundreds and hundreds of years with this very strict interpretation of DNR.
Mm-hmm.
But things have changed so much in the area of DNR in the last 50 years. Like right now, the Catholic Church has so many, many people that want to be fully part of the Catholic Church and be able to take the sacraments, but they can't because they have been divorced and remarried.
Right.
This statement by the Pope could lead to a revised teaching which would enable thousands and thousands, maybe even millions of people to be accepted fully into the Catholic Church. And what's really interesting about this is the part I find really fascinating, is that the Pope's statement that he just made about people not being bound because they didn't understand what they were getting into, it reflects the Church of God movement, what we learned back in 1974. And some of you old timers out there, you might remember this.
I was only 4.
You were only 4.
Yeah.
All right, the churches of God back then they were strict as on DNR as was the Catholic Church. I mean, it was strict in the old days of the church. They had a whole system to determine whether or not a person was bound to a previous mate. Mm-hmm. They had a whole inquiry process to investigate in great detail all the circumstances leading up to a person's final status. And this old DNR doctrine in the Sabbath-keeping churches of God went all the way back to, anybody want to guess what year it goes back to? The 1860s with the founding of the Church of God Seventh Day.
Wow.
That's where all of this started. But back in 1974, the Church of God ministry came to the conclusion that some people in their marriage vows had absolutely no intention of following those sacred vows. Mm-hmm. They went into the marriage saying, I'm really not going to do this. I've got to go through the ceremony, but I really don't believe it. And then there were some of those who had no understanding of the biblical marriage vows. And some were too damaged emotionally by bad upbringing to understand these marriage vows and to abide by them. And the Church of God ministry, for the most part, and again, all ministers in the Church of God don't agree on everything, but a lot of them agree on this, we came to the conclusion that marriage is like any other covenant, in that if one of the parties does not go into the covenant in good faith, mm-hmm. or can't go into it in a good faith, it is an invalid covenant from day one.
Right.
And at the time that this change took place in 1974, we had a few ministers who took great exception to this change, and the church had splits about it. Mm-hmm. No doubt, if the Catholic Church moves into a similar position that's currently held by the majority of the churches of God out there, there will be splits in the Catholic Church.
Are you making predictions?
I'm not.
Okay.
And so I'm going on to the next part of the text where I say, and we're not making predictions because we just don't know. I'm only commenting on this because the latest news from Rome has made me want to give a sermon on the subject of DNR. And if I do it, I don't know if I have the courage or not, this sermon is probably going to take me months to put together, and I'm probably going to need to have it reviewed by the senior ministry of CGI before I present it to the congregation. Okay, do we have any...
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear that.
And see, that's what I do on the controversial ones, because, some people say, well, Wes, you're such a maverick, you're such a loner, you're out there all by yourself, you got this shaggy hair, you wear these beetle boots. But really, when you think about it, a lot of the controversial sermons that I've given, like on tithing, the role of women in the church, gay marriage, I have run those by the senior leadership of CGI before I presented them, and they have asked me to make a few tweaks on them, and I've done it because I think it's important that we all submit ourselves to one another. I can't be an island off to myself and say, oh, I'm just going to do what I feel is right. No, I have to submit myself to other men in the church, and I'm more than glad to do that.
I think that'd be a very interesting sermon, because I think what you're saying, as far as our church history and what we've learned, and I guess what the Catholic Church is going through, there's a lot of other denominations that have different stances on divorce and remarriage. Yes. Some stricter, some less strict. So this will be a good message for everybody to see what does the Bible actually say about it.
Well, hopefully someone else will be braver and faster than me and cover this, and I won't have to. Because I know I'm going to get flack. Because on these controversial sermons, when I do give them, I do get flack over them. I mean, I've had people just in a rage over some of these sermons I've given. Okay, all right, let's talk about the stuff that's really important. We're going to get to the shout-outs.
I have a couple of comments.
You have comments. All right, before the shout-outs, give me comments.
Yeah, Carl wanted to know, where did the church begin in the 1860s?
It began, and here's another study I need to do on the history of the Church of God Seventh-day, because we came from there. The first churches in the Church of God Seventh-day started simultaneously in Iowa and Michigan. They didn't know each other existed. And they both came up with these conclusions about the Sabbath, clean and unclean. And by the way, back then, they had their thing about the beast too. Only their beast was Napoleon III of France. Okay. So they had these almost identical positions. They discovered each other. They had these conferences, one in Iowa, and there were organizations, and one in Michigan. And they got together and formed a general conference, and I think it started in Missouri, and it finally ended up in Denver.
So what you're saying is the church started with churches that were separate getting together for a common purpose.
There you go.
Pretty impressive.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty impressive.
Yeah, okay.
So that's not West Virginia, Oregon, Michigan, and Iowa.
Say that again?
Not West Virginia or Oregon, which people guessed on here.
I guess they have a strong presence in Oregon, right?
Yes, they do.
Yes.
And that's part of the history. They had Duggar was up there for A.N. Duggar for a long time. When they split, and there was one group in Stanberry, Missouri. There was another group in West Virginia, in Salem, West Virginia. And for, I think, 12 or 13 years, there were two Churches of God Seventh-day, one in Missouri, one in West Virginia. And then they reunited and decided to move the headquarters to a neutral site in Denver, Colorado. It's a fascinating history. And let me give you a preview of it real quick story. What would you think of a minister who, if he got up to preach, and while he's preaching, you're in this old building, and the floorboards are kind of not matching perfectly. There's little cracks between the planks and the floorboard. What would you think if this minister's giving a sermon, and every once in a while he spits his tobacco, and he's so good at it, he spits between the floorboards, and he never touches the boards. That's how good.
I would say thank you that he's that good.
Yeah.
I think I might have hurled during church.
Well, that was a guy named Gilbert Cranmer, and he was one of the.
I don't know what to think about that. Really,
this is so fascinating.
Yeah,
he was one of the first guys to be a minister in the Church of God Seventh-day back in the 1860s. He worked with Ellen G. White and her husband John. They had a split. I'm getting way off on another subject. Well,
that might be a good box one day to go through church history.
Okay, we can talk about that. Because see, I had access to the historian of the Church of God Seventh-day. His name was Robert Coulter. He was the pastor of the Grand Prairie, Texas church, and I was there with him for like 6 or 7 years. And every chance I got, I would sit at his feet and listen to him tell stories about the history. He's written books. Anyway, okay, we're off the subject.
Yeah.
All right, any other comments, Nancy?
Only an opinion that the Worldwide Church of God was worth the Catholic Church when it came to divorce and remarriage.
Well,
that's an opinion.
Okay, that's an opinion. And let me say this. If you were in a DNR situation and your life was held up for years while they made a decision and you didn't know where it was in the process, I could see somebody saying this was a horrible, horrible situation.
I know a family that the husband and wife had been married for years, had grown kids, and then made them separate.
Another DNR horror story.
So anyway, we got tons of those, but go. Okay. So now you were saying, let's get to the important stuff.
Okay.
Important stuff, like the shout-outs.
We'll get to the shout-outs. Okay. Jeff and I just got back from camp. A couple weeks ago.
We were so tired a week ago we couldn't make it last week.
We couldn't do it.
And I hate that we didn't do it, but we were tired.
That was one of the reasons we haven't had bots over the last 2 weeks. Jeff and I were at camp. We had a great time.
Oh, wonderful.
We had 22 campers. We had Bible classes during the day, and in the evening we had praise music and devotionals. We had tons of outdoor activities, and we are already planning for next year. We want to have the 2017 camp during July 4th week. All of you out there
we haven't got that set yet. That's when we want it, but we haven't got it set yet.
It's not set in stone. We're working on it.
Yeah.
All of you out there, if you have kids, write that down, the July 4th week. If you think your kids are interested, contact us right away because spots are going to fill up really fast.
Yeah, and we're going to go even more this year. We're hoping to double it. 60 kids. So 60,
yeah,
maybe 60. At least 40, but maybe 60.
Yeah.
I think we'll have room for 60 or so.
Yeah, hurry up and set the date because I think I need to be out of town again on that one.
Yeah, Nancy was out of town. How convenient. Okay, y'all got some shout outs for us?
I do. Bud's here, Grover's here, Grover's friend, I'm sorry, not Grover.
Grover's friend.
Grover's friend.
It's like Grover Cleveland.
Carl's here, William's here, Jeff, Super Jim, Skip Martin, Pat from West Virginia, Lady Tex, Michael Fast, and someone I don't think we've had a shout out from before is Lardell.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, there's a comment that says, Wes, look at what John Rittenbow says about DNR. So there's a resource for you. Look at his website.
Okay. John Rittenbow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, he's the leader of one of the churches of God that broke away from the big organization. In fact, I was friends with his daughter, Ginny, back in Pasadena, and her husband, Keith, for years and years. Mm-hmm. And I'm still friends with Keith on Facebook today. Okay, we want to plug our feast sites.
I have some people on Facebook.
You got shout outs?
Yeah, I got shout outs.
Oh, okay.
Let Nancy do all shout outs. I got to do some shout outs.
Jeff had shout out
already. Now, my shout outs get a little difficult. So you guys the easy ones. I got Mihai Saliver says Shabbat Shalom.
Oh, but they're not in the United States.
Okay, and then I have John Israel.
The Philippines.
In the Philippines.
Hey, John.
And he says,
we're happy you're with
I'm going to try to pronounce this. He says Malagayong Sabato.
Okay.
Which is Happy Sabbath in Tagalog. That's the local dialect.
Good. Well, look at you
Filipino.
getting bilingual.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm just reading what it says there.
Tell them to spell it out phonetically next time.
Probably did not say that correctly. But
hopefully you didn't say shoot the dog or something.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, we want to plug our feast sites now real quick, but before we plug them, I got to tell you some really good news.
He's gloating a little bit.
The Land Between the Lakes feast site is filled. It is filled.
I called to make a reservation. I called to make a reservation the other day, and guess what they told me?
We're booked. It's
I gotta stay down the road somewhere now.
Yeah, you're going to have to stay some. There's
a lot of good places. Right?
We don't want to scare you off because if you go to our website at cgi.org, we've got all kind of other places really, really close by. Like Nancy and I never
long list of places.
Plenty of bed and breakfast and lodges and motel rooms. Nancy and I never stay on site. We always stay at a big house off-site that we rent, and then we have parties and people over, and then we lose our deposit because church people get a little bit crazy. But
sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry about that. Don't ever do that again, Jeff. Okay, but here's the deal. We are excited. We are going to have a ton of people at Land Between the Lakes this year. It's only June, and I believe it was a month ago in May that they finally filled up their last booking in Land Between the Lakes.
It's
when
the
we
place
say
to
that,
be.
again, that's the state
facility
park,
itself,
and that's where they have.
And there's a lot of rooms there,
and there's
I'm really excited.
Cabins, and we have booked them all.
Yeah.
But there are other places, so don't let that discourage you.
Lots of places.
And that tells me everybody's figured out Land Between the Lakes is the place to go next year or this year. So make sure that if you want to go, you get busy and make your motel reservation or whatever.
Right.
Okay, Jeff, why don't you plug the other
and again,
sites?
we have Wagner, Oklahoma, and all this information. You go if you're on our website, go to cgi.org, FOT 2016. We have Wagner, Oklahoma, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, St. Petersburg, Florida, Fort Walton Beach with the Common Faith Network, and that one's if you want to go to a big feast site. That's a very big.
Well, we'll
site.
see if theirs is bigger than ours this year.
We're trying to get bigger if we can, but
there are no sharks in the Land Between the Lakes.
Yeah,
there are no sharks in Land Between the Lakes, y'all. There are down there at Fort Walton Beach.
There's sharks and probably gators and stuff.
Probably gators.
In Florida, and in Canada we have one in Collingwood, Ontario, and I'm thinking about myself possibly going to Collingwood after I start at the Land Between the Lakes. So it'd be nice to go up to Canada to visit folks.
All right. So check out our website and check out our feast sites. And Nancy and I are going to be at Land Between the Lakes the whole 8 days. Jeff's going to be there for the first part. So if you come there, come up and visit us and say hi. We want to get to meet you. Okay, let's plug our Wednesday evening Bible study. We got our third one now with Adrian Davis up in Canada. Isn't that right, Jeff?
Yeah, I talked to him. When I say talk to him, this was on my phone, chatted or something, but communicated with him. And this was the last one he did on that current series. So we're going to get that series posted on our website under a series. So he's going to start on the Book of Acts. Hasn't given me a title of it yet, but he's going to start in the Book of Acts. So that may take a little longer.
Yeah.
A few more chapters in Acts.
Sure.
And we'll start on the Book of Acts next week, next Wednesday. We had a little more people, in the little chat, and we kind of want you. If you're out there watching us, we need some people chatting on the Wednesday night, and I'll be there to like help you with chat, or I can even maybe relay these comments. As best we can over to Adrian. But we get on there, chat, get your comments about Acts. Acts, there's so much we can cover in the Book of Acts and stuff. So Adrian's going to lead this, and we really would like everybody to participate and be a part of that.
Now, I watched it last week, and anybody that watched it, I don't know if you saw this, Adrian showed a clip of two women fighting.
Yeah, I was shocked by that.
I mean, these two old ladies were actually fighting. And it reminded me of some of the family Thanksgivings that I've gone through over the years. But anyway, I've been meaning to talk to Adrian about that, seeing if he was over there filming some of my family. Yes?
I have a comment about Collingwood. Bardo says that if you Americans come to Collingwood, your money goes further because the exchange rate is good.
Good point. Thank
you. The dollar is strong.
Four single guys.
Maybe it is. I don't have to
maybe wine and dine some girls while you're there because you have all that extra money.
Yeah. And speaking of Canada, Adrian's from Canada.
Yeah, that's true.
And it looks like I think I'm going to Canada.
Wait, because of the election? August.
August. That's before the election.
Before the election.
No, I'm not leaving the country, no matter who gets elected.
I thought you were just telling us which side you're on, Canada or Mexico.
I don't know who's going to win. Okay. All right, I'm going to be preaching in two of the CGI congregations in Canada. One is in Burlington, one's in Montreal. And if you attend any of either of these two churches, give us a shout out. We want to know. And again, this isn't definite just yet. Also, I'm doing something that I have always wanted to do. I want to visit the 3 eastern provinces in Canada, which are Prince Edward's Island, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. And a lot of people don't know this. They think on the North American continent that New York and Boston and Florida, they're on the Eastern time zone, that in North America, that's the earliest time zone. Well, actually, no, they're in an even earlier time zone in those 3 eastern provinces.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they're 2 hours difference from what we are in Texas. Huh. And I've been watching the temperature. It's so cool up there. We're having all these 90s in Texas. Up there, at night, they're getting into the 50s. I am dying to get up to these eastern provinces. And I'm also going to be taking a swing through the New England states. I've never been to the New England states. There are, I think, 8 states I have not visited, and I'm going to get to hit 5 of them on this trip. So really looking forward to it. A lot of it depends on Nancy's schedule. In August, she's going to El Paso, and she may be going to China. So Nancy and I are trying to work out our details, and I'm working with Adrian. All right, let's put in a plug for church tomorrow. Live church services here tomorrow. Tell us about it,
Everywhere Jeff. You're looking at bots tonight, church will be tomorrow.
Yep.
Jeff,
11 o'clock.
Who's speaking tomorrow?
You caught me off guard. I got to get my schedule.
Not you, because you spoke last week.
Yeah.
Not Wes, because we know Wes isn't speaking.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, anyway, we're having live church services tomorrow at
and
11
some
o'clock
man will be
Central,
speaking.
And some man will be preaching. All right, and finally, we want to give you an update. We're going to go into a break in just a minute, and then come back for our Alpha and Omega. We asked you for some input on scriptures about the Sabbath.
Right.
And we pointed out how the Bible basically only gives us 2 admonitions regarding the Sabbath. One admonition is do not work on the Sabbath, and the other one is not to make and part of that is not to make your servants work or make your animals work. And we are commanded to assemble on the Sabbath. That's the second part. Don't work and assemble. Well, Marion Young Perkins sent us the best comment that we got on the subject, so we want to share a little bit. Marion sent us a 3rd category.
That's right.
And she pointed out that there are scriptures in the Gospels that tell us that on the Sabbath, you are to do good. Nancy, tell us about this.
Okay, well, she sent us, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 scriptures in Matthew, Luke, and John that talk about doing good on the Sabbath. So I won't read all of them, but let's start with Matthew 12, 10 to 12. And behold, there was a man which had his hand withered, and they asked him, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath days? Because remember, Christ healed him, and he said, how much? But then he said, how much then is a man better than sheep? Therefore it is lawful to do well on the Sabbath days. actually Mark 3:4, and he said to them, "It is lawful to do good on the Sabbath, or is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath or do evil, to save life or kill?" But they wouldn't answer him. Luke 6:9, then Jesus said to them, "I want one thing: is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or evil, to save life or destroy it?" So all of these things just point out that you should be doing good on the Sabbath. So there's a couple more here too. But anyway, that was great.
Thank you, Marion, so much for sending that. We really appreciate it. And I'm going to keep those. I've got them printed out. I'm going to put them in my Bible and save them. Yes, sir.
So now you're going to say the Sabbath only tells us three
Richard
things.
Crow is speaking tomorrow.
Richard Crow.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've never heard Richard Crow speak. He's from Houston. It should be really interesting to hear.
He's up from Houston.
He's up from Houston. Yeah, up from Houston.
Okay,
He lives down in Houston.
Richard Crow will be preaching in whatever media you're watching on tonight. You can watch it at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning Central Time, and you can see that. And also, before we break, I want to say, and don't go away because we're going to come right back. If you're watching on Facebook, share it on your Facebook page so other people can see what's going on here tonight.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to get into our Alpha and Omega current events. Nancy's going to talk about would Jesus wear a Rolex. And notice I'm wearing a 1995 Timex, okay? So make sure everybody understands.
So we know you're not Jesus?
Yeah, well, it means I'm not getting rich off the gospel. I just want to make sure everybody. And then after Nancy's thing, we're going to do our Genesis Bible study. But first, let's take a quick commercial break. Stick around, don't go away. We'll be right back.
One of the most controversial subjects of Christianity is the Holy Spirit. One of the fastest ways you can anger some Christian teachers is to say that the Holy Spirit is not part of a Trinity. If a Christian radio program denies certain things about the Trinity, that program will immediately get removed from most Christian stations. Chances are you had no idea that the Holy Spirit is such a hot-button issue. You would be amazed. We can help you learn more about this subject by asking for our booklet called Comforter, Helper, Counselor. It's on our website at cgi.org, and it's free. We hope that you ask for it. That's Comforter, Helper, Counselor at cgi.org.
All right, and we're back.
Are we back?
Yeah, we're back.
Okay, I'm glad we're back because my screen is not working.
And Nick
Here
and
we go.
Nancy are online with us now.
Nick and
Hi,
Nancy. Hey, Nick and Nancy, how you doing? Now, we had a special request from one of our viewers tonight that we actually perform the Johnny Rivers song called Would Jesus Wear a Rolex? And
Johnny Rivers.
You got your guitar?
Ray Stevens.
Oh, I thought it was Johnny Rivers.
Ray Stevens.
Ray Stevens, I'm sorry. I can't tell them apart. And so I was going to bring my guitar.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great song, and we really wanted to do it, but we can't do it because YouTube and Facebook will not allow us to do
Basically what they'll do is they'll kick us off immediately after we finish.
So we can't do it. It's a great song, and maybe you can go out and listen to it sometime, not right now. Now, our not being able to sing that song doesn't mean we can't talk about the concept of ministers and money. Nancy, what have you got for us tonight on this subject?
Okay, well, the song points out the luxuries of a TV evangelist who is asking for money, and then goes on to the singer goes on to ponder if Jesus would wear a Rolex, drive a fancy car, be political, have a second home, have a wife who wears furs, etc., etc. It's an interesting question. All right, we're all familiar with the scripture, 1 Timothy 6:10, that says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs." You know, not all the Bible's comments about money are negative. Luke 19, 11 through 26, the parable of the talents, indicates that, money is something that we should be spending wisely, but not that it's wrong to have it. Ecclesiastes 7:12 says, "Wisdom is a shelter as money is a shelter. But the advantage of knowledge is this: wisdom preserves those who have it." In other words, money is only effective as a shelter to a certain point, but it cannot save you. I would also add, neither having money nor giving it to a particular organization will save you in this life or the next, no matter what the preacher tells you. Only Jesus can save you. Who can save you? Jesus. Only following Jesus can give you a life of true abundance and riches. And obedience to God's law, and laying up treasure for yourself in heaven, not giving to a televangelist, no matter how much he or she says, differently about that. So none of that's going to help you. I Googled richest ministers in the United States. I love that you can Google anything you want. Just come up with a phrase, they'll come up with an answer. Oh, wow. They gave me 15. Top 15 and their net worth. I'll just talk about 10. All right. The first one is, anybody want to hazard a guess? No? Mm-hmm. Well, if I could look at this.
Their net worth.
Net worth, not just their income, their net worth.
You're talking about what these pastors are worth,
these
in their assets.
Yes.
Oh, Joel Osteen.
No. No, Kenneth Copeland.
Oh, wow.
$760 million.
That's his
what did you just say?
$760 million.
He's almost a billionaire preacher.
Yes, more than 7 times as much as the second place person. Just to give you a frame of reference, Beyonce is only worth $450 million.
Is that all?
Madonna, $650 million. She's number 9 on the list of the top 10 Hollywood people.
Kenneth Copeland his net worth is more than Madonna?
More than Madonna.
Wow.
And J.K. Rowling, who wrote a bunch of books you might be familiar with and that made into movies, she's the number 3 place. And she just barely passes Copeland with a cool $1 billion.
Man.
All right.
Wow.
Number 2 is Pat Robertson, $100 million.
Okay.
That doesn't seem so bad now.
Number 3 is Benny Hinn. That's right. It's all relative. Benny Hinn, $42 million. Joel Osteen, only $40 million. If you preach health and wealth, the health and wealth gospel, you ought to be a little richer. You ought to be up there.
Yeah, but he doesn't preach tithing, where I bet Copeland does preach
bet he
tithing.
does. That's right. That's right. A guy named Creflo Dollar is number 5, $27 million. Seems ironic, like Dollar should be in the 5th place. And only has 1/10 of what Copeland has. 1/10. Yeah. All right. Number 6 is Billy Graham, $25 million. Rick Warren, $25 million. Now, if you don't know who Rick is the guy who wrote The Purpose-Driven Church and The Purpose-Driven Life. And I thought this was very interesting because he says he and his wife aim to live on 1/10 of their income and donate the rest. I think that's very admirable. Yeah. So at $25 million, that's an impressive 10th, though.
Yeah. And again, a lot of his income comes from his book sales.
Right. I get that's right. That's a good point. And I'm going to belabor that a little bit more than that. Anyway, seems like if he was living on the 9/10, like Copeland, apparently he he could be pretty close to Copeland. Okay, 3 more. T.D. Jakes, $18 million. And now we have 2 women. Juanita Bynum, who I've never heard of, $10 million, and Joyce Meyer, $8 million. So that's the top 10. Now, these folks aren't making all this money preaching at church, as Jeff kind of pointed out. Often it's book sales, Bible studies, cable channels. Maybe they own a cable channel and they're selling time in other ministries, and personal appearances. And remember, net worth is not income, so they're not getting, so many billion or so many million, a year. All right, it's the value of the shares of their channels, their home, TV, that Rolex if they have it anyway. These men and women may have modest salaries and invested well in the stock market or real estate, but probably not. The point is that we have made movie stars out of these people who are supposed to be servants, slaves of God, and servers of God's people. When we're willing to pay $100 to see one of these popular speakers in person, or fork over $180 for a DVD and workbook, we help create their wealth. Mm-hmm. But, we also pay the salary of the tech folks and the cameramen and the printers and all of that. Mm-hmm. When we donate to a fund drive, if it's to a church or to, some other nonprofit, we should know how much of that, what percentage of that goes to the cause and how much to revenue generating machines. So how much goes back to administration. And this is true, again, whether it's a preacher or a church or any other nonprofit. We don't know the hearts of these men and women, and that's an important point. We cannot judge them. I know that I'm uncomfortable with the idea of tithing to an organization that produces this kind of wealth for individuals. But that doesn't mean I won't buy a book or do one of their Bible studies. Mm-hmm. I do know that when Satan offered our Lord Jesus everything, the whole earth, Jesus declined. Mm-hmm. He gave up everything to save us. He didn't seek to be a rock star when he walked this earth. And according to Isaiah 53:2, he didn't even look like a rock star. Mm-hmm. He didn't stand out in a crowd. Jesus didn't have a mansion. He didn't ride in a fancy chariot. And we know that he maybe had at least one robe nice enough not to be cut up because it was divided by the guards according to the scripture by the soldiers instead of being cut up and shared among them. Mm-hmm. So with all this, the better question might be, why do we need to create rock stars out of preachers? Are we focusing on the messenger instead of the message? We just need to be at T.D. Jakes' church. We just need to be a part of that organization. Are we fooled into believing that a particular preacher or teacher has the secret sauce to salvation just because they're dynamic or wildly successful or good looking or create easy to follow Bible studies? Why give money for a man to fly on a private jet to a foreign country for a conference when I could give it to a women's shelter 15 miles from my home?
Good point.
1 Timothy 6, 11 through 12 gives us guidance on what Christians should be doing instead of loving money. It says, "But you, man of God, flee from all this and pursue righteousness, godliness, faith, love, endurance, and gentleness. Fight the good fight of faith. Take hold of the eternal life to which you were called when you made your good confession in the presence of many witnesses." Matthew 6, 9 through 12 tells us to not lay up for ourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust corrupt and thieves break through and steal. Matthew 6:24 says, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't serve both God and money." So we know that money can be a master that pulls us away from God. And Titus 1:7 tells us, "For a bishop, as God's steward, must be blameless. He must not be arrogant or quick-tempered or a drunkard or violent or greedy for gain." So we know that anyone who is greedy for personal gain does not meet the qualifications for a bishop or a minister. So while we cannot judge the hearts of these men and women, we do have a right to look at actions and lifestyles and expenditures. Look at their rate sheet, see what they're making for at conferences or what their income is, and ask, does what I am seeing indicate to me that he or she is serving God or money? We also have a right to ask ourselves if the extravagant lifestyle is something we want to invest in, for them. In fact, if we don't ask ourselves that question, we could be guilty of squandering our tithes and offerings. I don't want my pastors to be wandering the streets without a roof over their head or not knowing where their next meal is coming from. So, Jeff, don't worry. I'm not advocating.
Yeah, my last meal was pizza. So.
And you knew where that was coming from because you ordered it. Yeah.
Y'all brought it.
Well, somewhere between net worth of over $700 million and living in poverty is the right balance. Maybe your marker and acceptance point is different than mine. But the point is that we should be good stewards of our own incomes in these matters. Think about these things, figure these things out. Recently, it's not just pastors that this can happen to. Recently, a member of one Church of God told Wes that he had several pairs of $3,000 cowboy boots. These boots might be worth it. Maybe they're made out of dinosaur hide. Very rare in this age. My personal opinion is that it's excessive. But that's just my personal opinion, and probably based on the fact that I don't have $3,000 lying around for cowboy boots. Well, when I see the spiritually or physically poor and suffering, it feels like a sin to be so very, very wealthy in material things and spend money on the lavish lifestyle, whomever you are, but especially if that money's made off of preaching the gospel. However, I also realize that compared to folks who live in third world countries, that $30 pair of shoes I bought a couple of weeks ago probably seems decadent.
Yeah.
So each of us,
it is.
Yeah. Each of us has blessings and talents, and we're tasked to use them wisely. Each of us has to ask ourselves if we could or should be giving more than we do, of money, of time, of talents, of blessings, and all of those things. Am I trying to serve two masters, worshiping money or success instead of God? Is the love of money creeping into my life, infecting my heart, bending my decision making in favor of making more of it instead of spending it wisely? The bottom line is that I do not think that Jesus would wear a Rolex or $3,000 cowboy boots. His example is one of giving everything. We each need to spend our money, talents, and time wisely. Remember the lesson of Luke 12, which I alluded to later, where things on this earth can be stolen, rusted, worn out, but the things of eternity cannot be ruined. So,
yeah.
Okay.
A couple shout outs here. Priscilla Hawkins is watching. I just got a text from her.
Oh, right.
And Wayne and Karen are watching. Karen is the infamous Susie Q in the Buffett Show.
Did they text you? Or?
Yeah, they texted me.
Okay.
So welcome all of you to the show. And let me just throw a little interjection here. I'm going to go off script here. And I want to make sure that everybody out there that watches the show understands nobody at CGI is getting rich off the gospel.
No.
In fact, the vast majority of our ministers that we have in CGI are not on the payroll. I'm not on the payroll. I'm not making a dime doing this, and I have not been on a church payroll since 1981. Some of you weren't even born back then, and that's back when I was an instructor at Ambassador College. So when you give your support to CGI, don't worry, nobody's getting rich on it. I believe we have a requirement in our bylaws that a certain percentage of our money must be spent.
50%.
50% of any money that we get has got to be spent on preaching the gospel. That's how important it is in our bylaws, and it makes sure that nobody's going to get rich off of this. So thank you, Nancy. We're going to take a short break, and we're going to come back for our Genesis Bible study, so don't go away.
One of the most difficult jobs in the world is that of President of the United States. Being Commander-in-Chief of the military as well as leader of the free world is not an easy task. Every once in a while, pollsters ask the following question to the American public. They say, could you do a better job as president than those who have served in the past? And most people overwhelmingly say, no, there's no way I could do better. Being president is one of the most difficult jobs in the world. But there is a segment of people who don't agree with that assessment. We're going to look at this demographic group. I'm Wes White from CGI.org, and welcome to Connecting History and the Bible. Now let's go to Huntsville, Texas. I'm standing in front of the Texas State Prison in Huntsville, Texas. It currently houses some of the most dangerous criminals in the state, and we don't need to go into detail about their heinous crimes. But psychologists and sociologists are amazed at the responses they get from the incarcerated inmates when these convicted criminals are subjected to questionnaires. And one of the questions that gets the most interesting responses is the one which asks if this inmate thinks that he could do a better job as president than those who have served in that job in the past. And let's face it, some of our presidents have lived through extremely trying times. Presidents James Buchanan and Abraham Lincoln both found themselves in the almost impossible situation of watching the Union split before their eyes. President James Madison had to watch as the country was invaded by foreign troops that burned the White House. Herbert Hoover and Franklin Roosevelt presided over a country in the midst of economic depression, where millions were either homeless or jobless or starving. Some presidents didn't always do so well in their job as Chief Executive Officer of the United States. Andrew Jackson ordered the removal of many Indians from the eastern states to Oklahoma, where thousands died in what is now known as the Trail of Tears. What's interesting about this is that when we ask our poll question to felons who are incarcerated, the majority of them answer with something like this: oh yeah, I could do a whole lot better job as president than these guys that we've had in there in the past. And why did they respond this way? Psychologists tell us it's because so many of these criminals exhibit sociopathic behavior, and they're suffering from mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and narcissism. The Bible seems to indicate that a healthy mind has a fair amount of humility. The book of James tells us that God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. It also says that if we humble ourselves in the sight of the Lord, He will lift us up. Again, a healthy mind has humility. A mind with arrogance is one that needs healing. So the next time you see anyone in a difficult job, whether it be painter or pilot or president, try to show a little humility before you talk about what a bad job that person is doing and how you could do a better job. We'll see you next time on Connecting History and the Bible here at CGI.org.
In the early days of the church, there was a great controversy between Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians. A dividing line seemed to have been drawn between converts of Jerusalem's apostles and congregations led by Paul. We know that there was a time when Paul was upset with Peter over issues dealing with the treatment of Gentiles. Was it a situation where Paul taught that the law was done away with? Or was it a situation where Paul taught against a perverse and apostate religion that claimed to represent the teachings of the Old Testament? We would like to offer you a free booklet entitled The Book of Galatians, a Commentary. It's free. You can get it here at cgi.org. Again, the title is The Book of Galatians, a Commentary at cgi.org.
We're back. Let's see, we're going to do our Genesis Bible study, but first, Nancy, you got a couple more shout-outs for us.
Right, two people that have joined us, Positive Dennis and Tim Puzak.
I know Tim, he's in New Mexico. In fact, I'm glad you mentioned his name. We're thinking about bringing Tim onto the show as a regular, as well as Bronson James. We're still working out all the technical difficulties. Tim is a terrific guy. He translates the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he's somewhat of an expert in Paleo Hebrew language. Now, if someone says, what's the difference between Hebrew language and Paleo Hebrew language? And I think I was supposed to get an example so I could put it on the screen. I don't have it. But the Hebrew language, the letters are the ones that came out of Babylon. When the Jews came out of Babylon, they're kind of block style. The Paleo Hebrew are more like stick figures and little illustrations like hieroglyphics.
Yeah, closer to a more primitive form of language.
Primitive, yeah. And he knows all about this stuff. He's really good at it.
Good.
So we want to bring him on the show as a semi-regular if we can get the technical stuff. So we're working on this.
We're gonna get it done.
And
we'll
carve
get
out some time when we're not talking.
Yeah, we're just going to come up with the time.
We'll fit some time in here.
For our Bible study.
Okay.
Yeah.
But first, I've got some bad news. I'm sorry to say, but we've got to start this Genesis Bible study with a complaint. We have a problem.
Problem? A problem? What kind of problem?
Well, it seems that someone complained that our show is too much entertainment and not enough education.
That's terrible.
Wait, I didn't get that. What was the complaint?
Entertainment versus education on bots.
I don't get that at all.
Well, I think I can remedy the problem right now, make sure we're more balanced in a Bible show.
That's great. How can you do that?
Well, we're talking about dinosaurs in this segment, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to prove from the Bible that Barney the purple dinosaur is evil.
What?
I bet Jeff likes that. 'Cause you don't like Barney, right?
Oh, yeah, man. Barney scares
Wait a
me.
minute,
Barney
wait,
scares me.
wait.
I never liked Barney.
All right, Wes, go over to your board.
Wait a minute. You want me to go over to the board?
Yeah, go over there and write it down.
Oh, man.
Yeah, go over there, Wes.
This is going to be a disaster.
I'm dying to see what you got here, Nancy.
Oh,
All right, I want you to write down cute purple dinosaur.
You want me to write that on my board?
Yeah, just write it down. But remember that the Latin language has no U, so wherever there is a U, make it a V. So no U is V. So write cute purple dinosaur, but use V's instead of U's.
Cute.
So it'd be CVTE.
Okay. Purple.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Dinosaur.
Dinosaur. Okay.
V's instead of U's. All right.
D-I-N-O-S-A-V-R. Okay.
There you go.
So what do you do next?
Okay, so now you need to get rid of everything that's not the Latin alphabet. So erase the T, E, P, N, A.
What about the R? That's not in Latin.
R, and S.
And P, okay, and E.
All the non-Latin.
Okay, the non-Latin, boy, we're going all the way back to my high school Latin. Get rid of an N.
Oh, was it that your native tongue in high school?
Get rid of
Latin.
an O, I wish, and the R. All right, so that leaves me with what? CV, PV, L, DIA.
No, there shouldn't be a P. No P.
Oh, that's right.
No P's in Latin.
There's no P in Latin? Yeah.
Except for
I was saying
Latin.
So you
Pig
should
Latin.
just have CV, LD.
Okay, so
no A, get rid of the A.
Get rid of the A, okay?
Okay.
This is
All right.
complicated.
All right, so now you know what the value of these letters are, right? C is 100.
C is 100.
All right.
D is 5.
5.
L is 50.
50.
D is 500.
500.
And then the
I is 1. I know
Whoa,
that.
wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I see what you're doing here. Look at these numbers here, right? You add them all up and guess what you get?
I don't know.
666.
Are you kidding me? Nancy.
That's right. We know from the book of Revelation that 666 is the number of the beast.
That's great. That's great, Nancy. Barney's the Antichrist is what you're saying, right?
All right. All right,
Barney 666.
I've gone along with this. Now you realize that this Barney thing that we just did is not helping us with the complaint that we're too entertaining and not educational enough.
I thought it was the opposite. I thought we were too educational and not entertaining enough.
No, the complaint was that we're too entertaining and not educational enough.
Never mind.
Okay, all right. This now, folks, this Barney exercise that got totally out of hand is really just a joke. But we really have gotten a few comments that were too entertaining and not educational enough.
And you know that's just crazy. Come on.
Yeah,
Look at the Bible study we go through in the book of Genesis. You know, we learn Hebrew words. We examine Christian doctrines. We get all kinds of good comments from our listeners. We just had a bunch of scriptures about not loving money.
Mm-hmm. And even the things we did during the break, like the Bible Q&A, we put a lot of time in that, connecting history and the Bible. Valuable stuff, valuable stuff. And we have hundreds of viewers. I think last week we had over 1,000 people. We had people watching our replays. Mm-hmm. So again, maybe it's entertaining, but it's very educational, very educational.
Yeah. Now, what we've done is we've had some fun at the expense of a few naysayers, mm-hmm. Okay? But now, I know you two are going to ask me the name of the person, and I'm not going to give it because 1 Peter 4:8 says that love covers a multitude of sins, mm-hmm. and I'd like to think that it also covers a multitude of persnickety comments. So we're not going to give you the name of the person. Okay. All right. Now, sure, and let's talk about something here. Let's be real upfront. If you're the type of person watching who loves doom and gloom, you've come to the wrong place if you come to bots. We know that the world is messed up. There's a lot of sin out there. We don't get together on Friday nights to obsess with how bad the world is out there. When Christians get together, whether it's Sabbath services or here like we're doing tonight, this is an assembly that should be an oasis away from the doom and gloom of the world. So if you want to find a place to get together with other Christians and gripe about how bad the world is and how bad those people are, there's a lot of sin out there, mm-hmm. You're not going to get it here at Bots, and we hope that you'll say, yeah, I like it better here at Bots. Yeah. We're here to celebrate God's Sabbath and to enjoy life as God's Word.
They can start their own show. Bring on the gripes.
Bring on the gripes.
Bring on the curmudgeon.
But we still want to hear from you viewers on this. Do you think we have too much entertainment, not enough education? We want your thoughts. Please weigh in our chat room. Let's move into our Bible study. And I'm going to set the 8 timer, and we're going to set it for 20 minutes tonight so we stay on schedule. And when you hear it ding, if I don't hear it because I've got bad hearing, let me know. We ended our last show talking about 3 of the 5 major theories as to how dinosaurs fit into creation week. And we said basically, and this list isn't exhaustive, we said there are basically 5 theories on the relationship between dinosaurs and chapters 1 and 2 of Genesis. The first theory that we went over was that a day supposedly could be 1,000 years or even 1,000,000 years. That was the first theory. Mm-hmm. The second theory was what we called the temp theory. And the third theory was the test theory. If you're out there, I hope you write these down. And if you didn't get to hear these first 3 theories about how dinosaurs fit into the Genesis creation account, I hope you'll remember that you can go back and watch Bots number 19, where we went into detail about this. And remember that Bring on the Sabbath Bot show number 18 is where we started this whole study of the book of Genesis. In the meantime, stay with us. Don't tune us out. You can go back to it some other time. We're going to continue with our last 2 theories, number 4 and 5, about how dinosaurs fit into the book of Genesis. So stay with us, and then you can go back and listen to the previous studies another time. Mm-hmm. We're now ready to go into theory number 4 about how dinosaurs fit into Genesis. But before we go into theories number 4 and 5, last week as I was researching this topic for tonight's study, and I'm constantly researching, constantly trying to come up with updated information on the book of Genesis. We don't want to just, I gave this study years ago in the Church of God 7th Day, and I could have just pulled up all my old notes and regurgitated them, but I used them as a starting point, and I've updated it, and I'm constantly updating this Genesis thing. And the reason that I need to do this is because archaeologists are coming up with new stuff all the time. And I came across an interesting article that was published Tuesday by ABC News on the internet, and the writer was Avian Tan, T-A-N is her last name. And the article talks about how little scientists know about dinosaurs. And scientists have been studying dinosaurs for many, many years, but there's more that they don't know about dinosaurs than that they do know. For example, scientists don't even know what color dinosaurs were. The article talks about a man named Michael Skrepnik. And here's how you spell his name in case you want to research him. Skrepnik, Michael Skrepnik. He is very influential in how we, as the public, view dinosaurs. This Skrepnik is not even a paleontologist. Skrepnik is what they call a paleo-artist. And I don't want to take away from his career. He's very talented at what he does, but he does not have a degree in paleontologist. He's an artist. Mm-hmm. Skrepnik's job is to paint pictures of dinosaurs and use whatever colors he thinks that they are, even though he has no idea what color they are. And it's not like the real paleontologist can argue with Skrepnik when he makes the dinosaur green or black or brown or even pink, because there's just not enough scientific data to say with any degree of certainty what color the dinosaurs really were. Now, when it comes to dinosaurs that had feathers, and some of them had feathers, many times scientists know what colors they were because they have actually found dinosaur feathers. But they have found no skin from the non-feathered dinosaurs like the T-Rex or the Brontosaurus or the Velociraptor. So, please keep that in mind whenever you see pictures of dinosaurs. Again, our point is that there are areas of dinosaur study today that scientists know little, if anything, about. Okay?
Well, the thing about dinosaurs that I've found is that they're constantly changing what they know about dinosaurs.
Yes.
Where before, like they may have had a velociraptor with scaly skin, then now they'll show it with feathers, and maybe later they'll find something else that they think it may be. So they really don't know because it's changed so much in the past 20 years. What they understand, like even the movies Jurassic Park. They say Jurassic World's not accurate because they're not used to the latest info. So it's constantly changing because they don't know and they're constantly learning.
Yeah, and let me give you an example of that. When I was a kid, our school used to take us on a yearly trip to the Museum of Natural History in Chicago, because we live close to Chicago. And they had a T-Rex skeleton up there. And they found out later that the head that they had on there was the wrong dinosaur. Because they had a belief of what they thought the T-Rex looked like. And for years and years, everybody thought the T-Rex looked like this, but then it turned out they had it wrong and they've had to change it. All right, let's go to theory number 4. Right. Theory number 4 says the universe is only 6,000 years old. That's just like theories number 2 and 3 that we listened to in our last show. The believers of theory number 4 say that dinosaurs did not exist millions and billions of years ago. And unlike the believers of theory number 2 and theory number 3, who say that dinosaur bones were a hoax, these theory number 4 people believe that dinosaurs did exist. The people who believe in theory number 4 say that dinosaurs were created 6,000 years ago, and get this, not making it up, they still exist today.
Where are they at?
Well, we'll get into that. The proponents of theory number 4 say that dinosaurs were created in the same week that man was created. They say there were dinosaurs on Noah's Ark.
What?
They say that man has always coexisted with dinosaurs from the very beginning, and man still coexists with dinosaurs today. That's what they say. Some of them, now you're going to expect a punchline. There's no punchline coming. I'm serious yellow. Some of them say that Jesus didn't ride into Jerusalem on a donkey the days before his crucifixion. They say that Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a dinosaur.
What?
I'm not making this up. You can look it up on the internet and find it. It's not a hoax. Now, I got to tell you a story about this. I remember years ago, some goofy church lady in the Dallas area, she was telling me that back in the 1960s, some Japanese on a fishing boat off of the coast of Japan snagged a dead dinosaur with their fishing nets. Now, this was not a dead dinosaur that had died like thousands or millions of years ago. This dinosaur, according to this goofy church lady, had only been dead a few days, maybe just a couple weeks, when these Japanese fishermen snagged it with their nets.
That sounds amazing.
Amazing.
Wow.
And this wasn't a dinosaur skeleton. It was a complete dinosaur. It had all its skin, all its organs. It had not been dead that long, supposedly. And when she told me that, I asked her, I said, did the Japanese fishermen say, "He's Godzilla"? Okay, never mind.
Love that picture.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, there you go. It's Godzilla. Okay. if this story was true, they probably would have said, yeah, East Godzilla. But I don't believe the story's true. I think it's another one of these urban legends. And I got to do an interjection. There are so many urban legends in Christianity, and they make us look stupid. Like the one, and I've used this before when I give the sermon on the subject of hell. There's this one story that the Soviets in the 1980s, they were supposedly drilling up inside the Arctic Circle, way, way north. And they drilled so deep that they found hell. And they put microphones down there and heard people screaming because
I see people share that on Facebook all the time.
It's out. I'm telling you, people are spreading this nonsense out there. This story has been preached in countless pulpits over the decades, and it's silly. And when Christians spread stories like this, it makes us look ignorant. Now, and let me do a thing about that. Just recently on Facebook this week, a lady in the church posted a thing about a huge human skeleton, a Nephilim that supposedly was found in, I think she said, Greece. And they had these doctored photos. Now, I gave a sermon on the subject of giants years ago. We got on the website.
And we used some of those doctored photos, I think.
And I showed doctored photos. And this thing was enormous. It was even bigger than the hoaxes that I showed in my sermon on giants. So I wrote back and I said, please be careful with this. And I'm trying to be real nice. And I said, I think this might be a hoax. Well, most of the time when I say something like that, people get mad at me. And they say, well, even if it is a hoax, it's still helpful to us as we prove God's Word.
I don't think so.
No.
You cannot prove God's Word with lies.
No, you cannot.
And we have to be very careful. There's a lot of good information that if something is too good to be true, what is it?
It's
not true.
It's not true. It's not true. And so that's too good to be true to find a giant lies like that.
This lady, I got to give her credit. Praise God. She said, Wes, I checked it out. You're right. This is a hoax. Absolutely. And she said so publicly on her Facebook page. And that's what we need to do as Christians.
There was another hoax that this reminds me of where people said they found like the Egyptian army in the Red Sea.
Yes.
Have you seen that?
Yes.
And I said, well, that sounds interesting. And I've seen a lot of church people share this. And so I followed it to the website where it was on, and this website was a website making fun of Christians. They even put in their comments that this was a satirical site, and that everything they had on there was satirical and was making fun.
And here they were lapping it up and passing it on.
And like, people were sharing it, so I nicely let people know, say, I'm sorry, this is a hoax. I'm not trying to be rude or anything like that. I just want to let you know that we can't, there's a lot of real information that supports what we believe. Don't share the false stuff.
And again, we can prove from archaeology and from the Bible who what the length of the biggest giant was. We can prove that. It's in my giant sermon if you want to go and watch it. But this one I saw about in Spain, it was just way, way too big. Please, please, brethren, be careful with these things that you read on the internet. The internet's a great thing. It helps us to teach the Bible to the world. We love the internet. But the internet is a two-edged sword. It has a dark side. And it's not just the pornography that's the dark side. That's just one part of the dark side. The internet also has a dark side which deceives well-meaning Christians who read something that's either not true or half true, and then they start sending this thing out to everyone in their mailing list. Sometimes this untrue or half-true stuff can be religious stuff. Sometimes it can be political. Sometimes it can deal with science. If you forward false information or half-true information and it has something to do with a person, you are bearing false witness against that person. You are violating God's commandments if you send out something that's not true or only partially true regarding some individual. And just because the person you're posting it about is someone you don't like, and just because he's a politician, it doesn't excuse your sin. It's still a sin. And I know that a lot of politicians are liars and thieves, but you're still bearing false witness when you do this.
Yeah, I can interject. I've seen, again, postings where people will say the Pope has said certain things.
Yeah.
And again, we probably disagree with a lot of things maybe the Pope says
doctrinally.
Yes. But if you post something false of what said, and the thing that really got me is they were quoting from the Third Vatican Council or something, or something that hadn't happened yet. I was like, well, listen, I never knew they had a new council or whatever. Right. And so again, it's one of these sites that just makes things up, and people, and then they have these false things. And again, a lot of times people are bearing false witness in ignorance.
Yeah.
And so the thing is, I think we should help each other.
Right.
I think that's one thing we should do as Christians. If we're on Facebook, we're on social media, we should not be offended if somebody corrects us on something like that. We should be like, "Wow, thank you." Because I would like people to do that for me as we fact check each other, because there's so much misinformation and we have to portray the truth, in the right way.
Right. The commandment about not bearing false witness does not give an exception for doing it to liars and thieves.
Yeah.
The commandment about bearing false witness applies to everyone. And if you do this, you are going to be held accountable for that action when you stand before Jesus. The end never justifies the mean. You can't say, well, he's an evil person, so it's open season on him when it comes to telling lies about it. Rather, please be very careful with your words. And just because you're forwarding something that was put together by another person, that doesn't absolve you of your responsibility if it's bearing false witness. When you stand before Jesus and he asks you about some post you sent out, it's not going to do you a bit of good to say, oh, but I got it from so-and-so. Mm-hmm. Or I was only forwarding a post that was created by another guy. No, it doesn't work that way.
And remember, Jesus said, by every idle word you speak, and that includes typing it on Facebook.
And also in the Bible says, prove all things.
Yeah.
So again, before you share information, prove it. And then hold fast that which is true, right?
Okay.
Prove all things.
Let's go back to our dead dinosaur story in the Japanese fisherman. Anyway, supposedly, according to the story, they brought this dead dinosaur on board and it was starting to stink. So the Japanese fisherman threw it overboard.
What?
Why? I asked why, and she said, well, because the fishermen couldn't stand the smell. And they needed to make room for the fish that they were going to sell for good money. So I asked the church lady, I said, you mean to say that guys who handle dead fish and dead squid and dead stuff all day, they couldn't stand the smell of this dead animal? And like fishermen can't stand the smell of dead animals. They smell like dead animals themselves because they're handling it all day.
Well, plus, wouldn't a dinosaur remains bring him in more money than any other fish they could put in that boat?
That dinosaur would have been worth millions of dollars.
That's right.
If you got a dead dinosaur, you're going to get millions for.
You put up with the smell. You put up with the smell.
You put up with the smell. And you're going to throw the fish away. Okay? The whole story is silly, and this is why people laugh at Christians when they spread this nonsense. These silly stories are partly why people reject Christianity. The non-believers end up throwing away the baby with the bathwater. They throw out the Bible because of silliness. They hear these stories and they reject the Bible. Many times it's our fault. Not always, but many times. The lady who told me this story was trying to convince me that dinosaurs are still alive today and they've always lived side by side with man. She believes in theory number 4. All right, now, if you have any thoughts on the subject of whether or not the universe is 6,000 years old, email me and share your thoughts. I want to hear from you. wdwhite49@yahoo.com. Send me an email. I want to hear from you. Nancy, what have you got?
RJ179. Hi, RJ. It says, is young earth a salvation issue?
No, it is not a salvation issue.
Young earth versus...
No, it is not. However...
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said he is correct. Yeah, it's not a salvation issue.
No, it is not a salvation
go
issue.
ahead.
Absolutely. But we do like to study the book of Genesis, and it engenders questions. And so we're trying to answer the questions that people constantly send to us regarding the book of Genesis and creation and dinosaurs. So young earth, old earth, it is not a salvation issue, but we need to deal with these answers as best we can.
And people have varying opinions about that.
Yes.
And it's a very touchy subject.
It is.
Yeah, and we may, as we get into it, stir some thoughts up.
All right, let's get into theory number 5. All right, we've given you 4 theories tonight. 3 last week and 1, number 4, and now theory number 5. Theory number 5 says that Lucifer, before he became Satan, was over his kingdom on the earth, and that kingdom included dinosaurs. Then Lucifer rebelled against God, and there was a war between the fallen angels and God's angels, and the dinosaurs died during that war. And this ties in with that asteroid that landed in Mexico and killed off the dinosaur population. In the Gospels, Jesus talked about how he saw Satan like lightning fall. The fall of Satan was after he was defeated following the rebellion that he started and had convinced 1/3 of the angels to follow him. This is known as the gap theory. It's also known as the ruin restoration theory. And we talked about this theory in detail in Bott's program number 18. We read several scriptures about this, and if you missed Bott's 18, you might want to go back and review it so you can hear the scriptures. Now, I think we need to discuss this word theory because it gets used a lot in the scientific world and in everyday language. Mm-hmm. People complain that I seem to be very free to take exception to church people, and I am free. But they say, well, Wes, you seem to let the scientists off the hook. Not so, and here's an example. I think we need to understand something about a lot of scientists. And many of them think differently than you and I do. I know the TV show Big Bang Theory is a fictional show, but I think it is illustrative of how many scientists think differently than you and I do. You know, we talk about the optimist seeing the glass as being half full. We talk about pessimists seeing the glass half empty. Well, a scientist looks at that same glass and says it's not half empty, it's not full. He says it's all the way full. It's only half filled with liquid and the other half is filled with air.
Good point, good point.
So we've got to acknowledge that scientists see things differently than we do.
They do.
Talk about the theory of evolution. And a lot of scientists tell us the following. They say, many scientific theories are so well established that no new evidence is likely to alter these theories substantially. The theory of evolution is one of them. The scientists point out that when we Christians say evolution is only a theory, we then become fair game to be laughed at in the same way as if you or I were to say that the theory of gravity is only a theory. Now, please hear me out on this. They also say that a quote-unquote fact is something that can be tested and confirmed in science. And although they acknowledge that they can't test and confirm the theory of evolution, the evidence supporting the theory of evolution, they say, is so strong that scientists no longer question whether biological evolution has occurred. So when they use the word theory, notice that they treat it like a fact, even though their theory, by their own admission, has never been tested and confirmed.
Let me interject here, if I could, because I want to explain theory.
Well, let me finish my point.
Finish your point, I'll interject. Go ahead.
In this conversation, they bring up the term theory of gravity, even though the theory of gravity has been tested and confirmed for at least hundreds of years. It has turned into a fact. This is totally different than the theory of evolution. So they like to take the word theory and put it into very emphatic terms of scientific dogma. But here's what happens when we in religion try to explain something. They say to us, well, you have a pseudo-scientific theory. And notice that they add the word pseudo to the conversation. Pseudo means bogus or a sham or not genuine. And I say, yes, it's a theory. I admit it's a theory. But evolution is also a theory. And they say, well, we in the scientific community use the word theory in the context of evolution. When we do that, we treat it as a fact. And they say, when you use the word theory, we treat it as a harebrained religion. There's a double standard here. Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I want to explain. So a lot of people, when they hear the word theory, they don't. And you state this correctly. So I wanted to kind of emphasize what you're saying, because the scientific community uses the word theory than what we think of as their theory. So I could say I have a theory, that that something exists. Like there's a theory of like the dinosaurs are out there in my backyard. That would be like I'm theorizing. That's like made up or something. But what a scientific theory is, they say, and again, when you're communicating with scientists, a scientific theory they say is a well substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world that is acquired through the scientific method and repeatedly tested and confirmed through observation and experimentation. So a lot of times what we think of theory is actually an hypothesis, where you just they're like a guess or whatever, kind of like music theory, right? You understand music theory with all the different notes or whatever. That's really a well-established fact. So when they think of theory, we have to communicate with them that they believe it's established fact, even though, again, as you're going to show, I'm sure, evolution doesn't have much facts to stand on.
Yeah, we've got a double standard. All right, the next thing we need to talk about is the gap theory. Again, remember we started this series, we said that we always have to know when we want to differentiate between, number one, things that we know, number two, things that we can safely infer, and number three, the times when we're waiting around in the weeds. We got that from Ron Dart. It's very wise advice. And we're going to talk about that because the gap theory is not number one. It's either number two or number three. It's very debatable. So I want to hear your thoughts about the gap theory. And we're going to take it up next time because we're just about out of time. We've got another message we need to give to you. And don't go away. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Nothing is surer than death and taxes. Millions of people pay taxes every day, and millions of people die every day. We have all lost loved ones through death. Death is a dreaded enemy. Death is not a friend. Many people have great fear when they think about their own deaths and deaths of others who are close to them. What happens when you die? Do you have an immortal soul that either goes up to heaven or down to an ever-burning hell after you die? It's time you learn the answers to these questions. We can help you. We have a booklet called Afraid to Die. You can get it on our website at cgi.org. It's free. Again, that's Afraid to Die at cgi.org.
We're back. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We hope that you'll come back next week. Share this on your Facebook. Tell your friends to watch the show. We hope you enjoyed it. And in the meantime, you come back next Friday night, same time, 7 o'clock. Whatever you're watching this on, whatever channel, come back and see us. We want to hear from you.
We're happy to be part of your Friday night.
Yeah, we really enjoy being part of your introduction to the Sabbath. So thank you so much, and have a good Sabbath.